So the other night we had 28-degree temperatures. That caught me a little bit off guard. I know I should be watching the weather a little bit better. But one of the things we have is these frost covers to kind of like take care of that frost. It allows it to hit the cover and not get on the plants. But what happened here is the frost cover was too close to the plants. And you can see right here, it's actually touching. So when the frost happened, it got on some of these plants. I think we're in the clear, but I wanted to show you this mistake so that you can learn from it. But check out, a couple of these broccoli plants were affected by the frost. And they'll come back. They don't seem that bad. But particularly this young growth down there. But like, look at this one. That one looks great. That one looks great. But the ones that were touching, you see where the frost got the plants. Now what happens when it freezes, the water in the cells is actually bursting and breaking. So that won't come back. But you can see the damage on the plant. This is why planting dates are so important. But as we said in previous videos, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So we try to get our plants out as early as we can. In this case, we got a little frostbite on that. So this is one of our celery beds, and notice we have some grass in between. Now this is actually acting as a mulch, and it'll keep down some of the weeding that we have to do. Now there's no such thing as weeds, but the mulch makes it harder for plants to go through, and so when anything does grow, we're not going to pull them up and weed them, we're just going to cut it and lay it down as mulch again. So we have like wood chip mulch in the path, and that'll rot down over the course of like 2 years. We'll ultimately scrape it up into our planting beds when it becomes dirt. And then in the garden beds themselves, we have like organic matter, whether it be straw, like wheat straw that we've talked about before, or in this is fresh grass that we just cut from the patch over there. I'll show you how that works here in a second. But we use that to mulch. It keeps down on weed pressure, but it also holds moisture in the soil so that any water that gets on these plants isn't getting cooked off by the sun and evaporating into the atmosphere. It's staying in the bed. That way we're harvesting the water, we're spreading it out, and we're sinking it into the ground so that we can use that available resource over the growing season and not have to water so much. So it's a great way. The least change for the greatest effect, and using the materials that we have available to cut down on the evaporation of the moisture in the soil. So I'm standing in an area that we're creating on contour garden beds, or mostly on contour garden beds. We have the mulch paths here, and then the garden beds, and then a smaller mulch path that allows us to walk through. But notice that this path right here is the same size as my tiller. So I can run the tiller through and prepare these garden beds, while all over here is where we're walking, where we're compacting the soil, and then where this mulch is rotting to ultimately be thrown back into the garden bed and increase that soil fertility and create abundant like ecosystems for the soil. But we're essentially composting in place with this mulch, cutting down on the compaction from like us walking through the garden. But we have like, this can actually be tilled up. It's the same width as the tiller. We have these sticks help us measure out the size of the bed, then the path, then another bed here. And this will work its way down these terraced areas that we've built. In our pathways, you notice the design of this garden. We're leaving a lot of this grass to grow tall. Now this is just a little sickle that I got off Amazon. These are really great with the serrated edges. But when I grab a bundle of grass and cut it, this becomes that living mulch that goes just like the celery bed. So we cut it and then lay it between the plants that we want to grow, eliminating moisture, composting in place. This smells like my dog peed on it, but it's a great mulch for the planting beds. Maybe not that so much, but again, we're just throwing it, and instead of, we can mow it down with the lawnmower, but we just throw it back on top of each other. And people might say, oh, this is a weed for the garden, but really it's a living mulch, and it's cutting down on weed pressure while adding fertility back to the soil. There's no such thing as weeds. It's just things that maybe we don't want in our garden, but it shows what's going on in the soil, whether it's like overly compacted or there's a mineral deficiency. That's really what a weed is. And if you're tuned in with nature, if you know what's going on with the garden, the landscape's going to speak with you and will tell you how you can make more abundant and more efficient garden beds and things that we actually do want to eat. Higher density calorie too. So again, I just cut it. These things are super sharp. I tell that to all the interns, and invariably somebody will end up cutting themselves with them, but it's just be real careful. Grab a bunch, come underneath it, cut it, throw it back on the landscape. We're not pulling weeds out because that soil structure is super important. All we're doing is chopping and then dropping. So we're talking about mulch over there. We can also use like plants as living mulch, whether it be like clover pathways. But in this case, we have a companion planting patch going on. All these little strawberries will grow up and act as mulch. There'll be that base layer, and then asparagus will grow up through it. We've put these stones in the middle, but I'm really just happy that these strawberries are growing. And but it's another example of like living mulch. You don't have to use wood chips. You don't have to use grass. Or whatever, you know, material you want. You can have the landscape be a living mulch, and that's ultimately like a thriving ecosystem.